And a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So we just have to see if we can go from the abstract to the concrete, if we can go from this wanting to create something functional and workable in our lives, and take it from, a wish, a hope that we get there, and actually create a plan around it. And this is what Saturn helps us with. The climb begins. It's a very tough particular part of the climb, this one. It's something that he probably practiced a lot. He trained for this, huh? So he trained for this particular steepness. And the more he trained, the steeper his climbing could be, the more challenging his climb eventually could be, But it takes practice. He wouldn't get to such a steep climb unless he knew he had the capacity to manage it. And that's the awareness of a magician. I told you Saturn is the alchemist. It's the one who puts the elements in correct order. And it is the one that understands the nature of creation. Here are the elements: the pentacle, the cup, the sword, and the wand are representatives of elements. And wherever you have Saturn in whatever element, as I mentioned earlier, you will have some definite lessons about how to use these particular elements in order to get where you want and what you need. So Earth. Now, Saturn in Taurus, for instance, can mean a lot of economical obstacles on planet Earth. There's a previous, memory of poverty, for instance, that keeps hindering you to get where you need and where you want. So you need to work on your capacity to have enough resources. You need to earn more money. You need to learn to value yourself and learn to put correct price on your service. And also you need perhaps to break a little bit away from the conditioned pattern of poverty that you might have experienced growing up in a family where poverty was the focus. Saturn in Virgo might see, as I mentioned earlier, there might be some obstacles relating to health or to the organizing principle. When Saturn is in Virgo, there's a definite need to organize your energy so that you make a functional self. Efficiency is part of the Virgo doctrine. Become more efficient, get informed, be aware of the details. And if you have Saturn in Capricorn, the leadership qualities that you need to develop are coming into more focus. Who were your authority figures growing up? Were they helpful or were they detrimental to your growth? Is there any way you can develop a stronger sense of authority on the inner levels so that you find this willpower that is the gold in Capricorn, this healthy willpower and not a forceful willpower? That's understanding the element Earth, what the magician does. The element of water, I also mentioned, it is emotional correction, emotional healing, emotional understanding. If you have Saturn in Cancer, a lot of your life will be spent on fixing what we call the skipped steps. A skipped step is a step on your path that maybe you've been evolving too quickly and some parts of you are not integrated into the self. You might feel insecure on the inner levels and still have a lot of responsibility in the world. That will be very energy demanding. So you have to go back to basic stuff, understanding your needs, understanding your emotions, understanding how to emotionally be able to regulate yourself, how to regulate your emotions into a functional unit. If you have Saturn in Scorpio, it's understanding power, emotional power. It's also moving beyond codependency, which is a huge theme in Saturn in Scorpio. It's like you always think you need other people to get to the next level. then you can end up in abusive situations where you abuse yourself, or you get abused by others, and it can be a very unhealthy kind of dynamic that, in many ways, creates a imbalance in um, the flow of energy. The biggest and deepest lesson in Scorpio is to realize that you have the connection to the soul. You have actually access to unlimited energy. You really, really, at one point, if you go into a deep dependency to other people, that can be a destructive experience. And it's dealing with the most destructive, self-destructive emotions that we experienced through, for instance, trauma. If you remember Amy Winehouse, she had Saturn in Scorpio. She destroyed herself. This beautiful talent, she destroyed herself. She felt absolutely incapable of finding true security in the world in herself. And she saw probably a lot of dark sides of having her power, etc. But it's, these getting to understand your self-destructiveness, or getting to understand the darkness, or understanding the darkness in others, and Saturn in Scorpio really delves into the underground. If you have Saturn in Pisces, there might be a need for correcting some of the ideals, some of the wishful thinking, getting in terms, confronting idealism that doesn't really have a realistic function, confronting wishes and dreams and fantasies compared to what is doable on Earth. And Saturn in Pisces is a really huge subject. Saturn and Neptune are very opposing forces. It's like a natural polarity, because Neptune is this eternal Peter Pan child, whereas Saturn is the mature adult. And when they get together, you can have the anarchist not wanting to follow any laws or obeying any authorities, or you can have that inner child that is completely petrified that they are not doing the right thing all the time. So they're seeking external authority and not finding proper external authority. It's such a complex placement, but it is correcting ideals. That is the essence of this. If your ideals aren't working, toss them away. If you are deeply conditioned by Puritanism or spiritual ideals, you might suffer in the world, because the world is a business place. It's a place where people are business minded, and you have to step up and face that game in the world, not being a part of the game necessarily, but you have to be aware of it. So Saturn in the water trine is definitely correcting some emotional tendencies. Fire. Now, if you don't have enough fire to ignite your persona, the enthusiasm, just as water is the security, the inner self nourishment capacity that we have, fire is the inner self enthusiasm that we have. It's self igniting. If you look at the sun, it's igniting itself all the time. This is part of the reason why fire signs are so incredibly expressive. They express themselves like poof, poof. It's like these energies that just come forth. And you need energy to get going. You need this kind of fire to have enough energy in the engine to get to the top. If you lose your enthusiasm or your faith while you're there, you won't get there while you're walking. It's like, oh, I lost complete faith in my project. I will now stop. If you don't see instant results, perhaps your fire will be extinguished, because fire is a very fragile element. It doesn't take much to extinguish it, especially not on Earth today. It's like, oh, there's nobody's supporting me. Boom, it just extinguishes itself. So Saturn in Aries is demanding you to understand your willpower and how you use it, and how you use this impulsive energy. Aries can be super good with ideas, have a multitude of ideas available all the time, but it needs structure and consistency. You know, Saturn, Aries is not a sign to complete things necessarily. It starts things. But if you have Saturn in Aries, you need to complete stuff as well. You can't just start, but you have to finish it. So it's understanding how to harness your willpower. Aries is a sign that is very, very dependent on enthusiasm and conviction to get to the next level. And that's why it's a little unstable element. It's the first fire sign. So it's like, it's a little fragile. You can just easily kill the initiative in an Aries. But the Saturn energy needs a little bit more, you know, Saturn Aries needs a little bit more leadership. It's really learning leadership in a way, because Mars, Aries principle, it's a very instinctual principle. It's like, it's reactive, it's just reacting to everything in a very impulsive way. Now, if you're very impulsive and instinctual in life, you might not find direction. Oh, you change, you burn bridges, you go here, you go there. So yes, and now the bell rang, of course. So I had to open up. Just to finish Aries, you know, like getting some consistency and getting some direction to this energy is very important. Fire needs direction. Energy needs direction. And Saturn offers this direction. Now, of course, as we understand, since the conditionings of Saturn often, as I explained earlier, is quite negative, this can be, you know, having Saturn and Mars archetypes coming together can mean a lot of harshness, like really being hard on yourself and being tough on yourself, a lot of suppressed anger, etc., that you need to deal with. And with all fire signs, if the expression is denied, there can be depression, or it can be some sort of resistance towards life on earth, because fire is very authentic. It sees things from an authentic point of view, and seeing how the world is very businessy. It's not a place for fire to thrive. Fire likes freedom. Fire likes timelessness. It doesn't really go well with this capacity to, you know, like having to wait. So the impulsiveness of Mars is like, what? I have to wait for my turn? I just want to get going now. So maturing Mars as a principle, or Aries as a principle, is a very challenging job, because there's a resistance to being forced. You don't want to be forced into doing anything. So this is, you know, the fire signs, when Saturn's in the fire sign, a joy, a capacity to feel joy can be eliminated in life. Same with Saturn in water sign, a capacity to feel life can be suppressed or not unavailable. So you need both feelings and joy to get moving. You need these particular ingredients to get to the top. It's very important. A little dash of joy, a little dash of feeling, a little dash of thought, and then boom, creation. It sounds easy, theoretically. Oh, theoretically, it is easy. But Saturn, Mars, Saturn in fire signs is definitely somewhat a challenge, right? It's as if that intuitive fire energy is being denied in one way or another. Like, you can't live your truth in a way, because the world is demanding you to live otherwise. And Saturn in Leo, Leo is a sign of support and love and expectations. There can be a very strong leadership potential with Saturn in Leo, but it's also It's also a challenge in the sense that if you don't grow up in a supportive environment, this natural superstar quality that you find on the inside could be denied. We all need to feel great with ourselves. I'm not saying we need, the inflation of the ego, but we need to feel great about ourselves. We need to feel that, yeah, I do actually have something nice to offer to the world. That's when it becomes a loving expression. Like, I know I'm valued. I know that what I have to give is something that the world actually needs. And that's the maturation of Saturn in Leo. It is, you can't always expect people to applaud you. There won't always be support, but you still have to do it if you believe in yourself. And it also means very often to divorce yourself from some parental figure that was not functioning well for you, right? That was not supportive enough, that was not a good leader in their lives, and therefore not a good leader for you either. And Saturn in Leo also reminds you have to take your creativity seriously, right? Because you have this moment, it's precious. And you're not always going to love this moment and you're expressing your gift. It is a painful experience if you have to go through the fear of being rejected while you're doing it, right? It can be very uncomfortable to be on stage and being aware of yourself. And that's the combination of Saturn and Leo. You become aware of your presence in the world. Somebody made you aware of it, not always in a good way. And that you have to overcome again. Creating life through love is what is creation. And in practical terms, that means if you allow yourself to play and have fun while you're walking, you found some freedom, you found some expressive freedom, you found some joy. And then it's fun again. Then you can be a child under the safe guidance of Saturn. You can be somebody who's having fun while walking, even though if it's serious. So using love, the element of Leo, as a part of the path, the journey, as a part of the capacity you have to put into the journey, that's when Saturn in Leo is functioning well. It's your responsibility to create life. Even if the odds are against you, right? And the last fire sign deals with faith. Sagittarius takes risks because they feel convinced. Now, if Saturn is in Sagittarius, it's not that easy to be convinced, because you can flip-flop between seeing and the vision, and then having high expectations and just, going into this energy where you feel, yes, I can do it. And then Saturn comes, boom, like a wall in your face and saying, oh, are you sure? We need to see some results. Saturn is always eager to see some results. And we've just left behind 2.5 years of Jupiter in Sagittarius. And what was the essence of that? Well, you had to go through your attitudes. What is it that you believe in? Do you have this negative faith system that you can't do anything or you can't do this? Or do you have a positive faith system where you have that quality of finding God within, and that God is a benevolent God that says, yes, next level, you have the courage to go through this as well. So it's correcting, Saturn through the fire signs is correcting the fire element. And fire element has a lot to do with your intuitive perception of things. If you didn't have an intuition about what was right or wrong, like, you get these inspirations. It's like when you see fire, it's like you get this kind of, wow, yes, this energy. When you feel energy in something you think about, like, I want to do this, that's when you are in the fire energy. And of course, If you don't have that, like, compare it to depression, where you have to drag yourself out of bed every morning just because you have to. It's not exactly a fun ride, right? So releasing and healing and being able to release the fire element from the castration of Saturn is part of the healing journey of Saturn in fire. Yeah, and my element, air. Air is also a very fragile and impressionable element. I mean, the only element that is not that impressionable is Earth, actually. All the others are very impressionable, easily distracted. Like me, I have a lot of air. And they are easily influenced, right? Fire just is not influenced in the way. Fire is fire, huh? But it just shuts off. Water is extremely easily to influence. It's like all the influences from the environment comes into water, and it's like if you put a little drop of color into a glass of water, you know it melts into the rest of the water and the color disappears because it's diluted, but we know the color is still there. So everything water is super influenced by the subconscious, the collective subconscious, the environment. So if the environment gets to disturb you enough, you won't be able to complete your journey. You go into fears. Oh, suddenly somebody else's fear got in your way, and then you think you can't do it. Now, the element air, even though I have so much of it, it's still the element I spend the most time reflecting on and meditating on. And I really suggest that you start doing that, like just reflect and meditate on the elements, go into meditations around the elements. It's a very easy way to get into the basics of astrology. It's the elements. That's really, truly understanding creation. Now, air is that the mind capacity of us to perceive thoughts. It's the thinking, it's the social realm, it's the communication, it's the interaction. It's very socially oriented. It is very interested, curious. It is very mental. It's the world of mantras. And this knowledge, this awareness, this consciousness that is air, when it gets under the dampening effect of Saturn, these are the definite signs that you need to discipline the mind a little bit, right? It's time to discipline the mind, correct communication, achieve correct understanding of things. Saturn in Gemini. Gemini deals with the immediate environment. It deals with the lungs. It deals with superficial activities that we sometimes just have to go through. It's the sign of small talk. Small talk because that's a nice way to survive in the world. I'm getting to know people on their premises. I'm not imposing my knowledge on them. Like sometimes Sagittarius is like talking in these far out there, and other people that can't understand what they're saying. Gemini is super good with understanding other people. They're really curious about what goes on inside other people's mind. But if Saturn is in Gemini, you might get lost in that, right? Things get lost in translation. It can be a definite, learning to analyze, learning to really think, learning to concretize knowledge, learning to focus on what's important and what's not. It's definitely a sign of intelligence, right? You have a lot of good teachers with Saturn in Gemini. there could be a lot of wisdom in these placements. Of course, Saturn works better with air elements than fire or water elements, for sure. It's pragmatic. Saturn is very pragmatic, and the air signs, they sort of get this kind of rational energy. But through Saturn in Gemini, there could be these definite lessons of learning to focus, learning to concentrate, learning to say no to things, learning to discipline your curiosity. Am I missing out of something? Like, yeah. And learning to express your truth. There could be these previous lifetimes of having your tongue cut out. Huh? Just say it. Don't talk according to what you think people want to hear. Saturn in Libra is a different cup of tea entirely, because it deals with relationships and balancing out the thoughts of others versus the thoughts of you, balancing out the projections, understanding how being projected on can easily disturb your center, your sense of self. And understanding the importance of maintaining an equilibrium between being alone and being with others. Saturn in Libra definitely bring in some relationship karma, right? Understanding what karma you carry in relation to others. What is it that you're here to learn? How do you relate to others in a good way? I see often when I see Saturn in Libra in a chart, I see, okay, here's a person who's still working on figuring out what's the midpoint between everything, learning how to be beyond polarity, learning how to be beyond this flip-flop between extremes. It could be some experiences that they've gone through in life, divorces, etc. is all part of the Libran Scorpion energies. Having to be stuck in the middle, not being loyal to either parts. It could be guilt in relationship to relationships, in relation to relationships. Feeling inadequate, that you never can do enough, right? Yeah, so Saturn in Aquarius is dealing with Uranus, the principle of Uranus, which is the Aquarian planet. And Saturn-Uranus combinations archetypally revolves around the new versus the old, the new structures of the mind versus the old structures of the mind. So it's deeply deconditioning Saturn in Aquarius. It is, in many ways, struggling between the old and the new, struggling to figure out how to free the mind from these old thought forms that exist in the collective and in our cultures and in our upbringing. The probably the worst part of Saturn in Aquarius can be a certain element of isolation. There's always an isolation involved in Aquarius, where we feel isolated from the group or isolated from our friends. Now, Aquarius has a lot to do with friendships, right? So it has a lot to do with groups, how we interact with groups. And the problem with Aquarius is the mind is very, very quick, right? It's like, oh, find all the mistakes in this picture, and Aquarius will go, oh, found them all. And that capacity to think critically or in a critical way, in a scientific critical way, can be very inhibiting on the communication flow. It can be very inhibiting on our capacity to create visions for the future, because you will find all the obstacles very quickly. And the capacity to be really hard on yourself is definitely present with Saturn in Aquarius. It's could be negative thinking or lack of freedom or feeling oppressed or having some situation in your life where you feel that the one you truly are, the individual self, the original self, is being denied by the group in some way or another. However, it can also show strong capacity for leadership of groups. It shows that your dharma probably lies in working with groups, and understanding group psychology will be very important. Just as Saturn in Gemini understands all the little bits of social interaction, Saturn in Libra understands all the entanglements of one-to-one relationships, then Saturn in Aquarius understands that, yes, the group consciousness is not always as we want it to be. There is, like, when you deal with a group, you deal with the totality of all the consciousness involved in a group. If you're a teacher in a classroom, you have to pay attention to those who are on a level of barely getting to understand what this is all about. And if you are also at the same time, you have some geniuses in the class, you have to also give them enough challenges to be able to thrive and have experiences and challenges enough so that they will move beyond their current level. So Saturn in Aquarius is definitely trying to decipher, what does it mean to be an individual in a group? What does it mean to have an original quality as a human being and still be able to cooperate with a group? The isolation that comes, and the outsider complex that we often find, and this struggle with the old versus the new, etc., is part of the Saturn in Aquarius individual trying to figure out how to use this higher mind in a correct way, how to, in a way, slow down these very quick processes of Aquarius so that you can live on Earth together with people and not always be critical about them. This is definitely a placement, Saturn in this particular field, that is very, very socially interested. It can be political interest, or, very concerned with the group thinking. And being able to stabilize, what would be the coaching experience. Let's say you were a parent with Saturn in Aquarius. You would definitely oppose the old authorities that you yourself were growing up in, and try to find new ways of being an authority in the world, a better way, some way that was more supportive. Especially if you grew up with somebody highly critical, some Saturn in Aquarius individual that was always kind of almost cynical, very hard, very rough, very cold. Saturn in Aquarius can experience a lot of cold growing up. So it is indeed a very interesting placement of scientific potential, of understanding the future, and of being able to take the best from the past and leave the rest, and then head on to the new future. So I hope that this little journey, we have a week now where we can discuss these elements, and you can share with me your elements, and perhaps also share a little bit of your experiences with your particular Saturn placement in relation to these particular elements that I spoke of. Because if you figure out and crack that code, a lot of other stuff will open up. You will get like a chance to see that, okay, I'm mastering this element now, for good and bad. I understood what to do now. And then you could have fun while climbing. And this, having a little fun while you're there, this trying to open up for learning, trying to open up for a gentle ride through your own life with Saturn um, as your companion is very important if we are to be successful. Too much pressure will just destroy us. Too little pressure will make us go into inertia. And this is relating to the moon cycle as well. I will just mention it briefly, that there's this 28 years progressive cycle for the moon, and there's a 28 transit cycle for Saturn. The progressive chart is 1 year, 1 degree. If you're familiar with it, you probably know what I mean, but it takes the moon 28 years to go through the whole zodiac and come back to its original place progressively. Not, of course, it just takes 28 days for it to go all the way around Earth and come back to its original point. But this moon Saturn energy, that is the natural polarity between Capricorn and Cancer, is extremely important to think about when we want to do something in the world, when we want to figure out how to find a good, healthy, and sustainable rhythm to get us to where we want to be. If we go too quickly, if we go too hard, if we are under too much pressure, our bodies will crack, our emotions will crack, our mind will become hysterical. So this knowledge of knowing that we have to have room for everything, we have to have room for rest, we have to have room for joy, we have to have room for playing, we have to have room for routines, we have to have room for relationships, we have to have room for our personal processes, we have to have room for resting and healing, is very important, because if we do the basic needs first, naturally we will open up for more opportunities to do the rest after. And evolution is like tying your shoes. The first couple of times you do it, it can be very, very hard. You'd see a 6-year-old trying to tie their shoes. They spend a lot of time trying to tie their shoes, but with experience, everything goes much more quickly. So Saturn is here to help us create new foundations and structures in life. And we have to perhaps do it, it takes a long time to begin with. And after a while, when we have the experience, what was initially very difficult will become very, very easy. If we go too hard and we push too hard and we try to understand everything of astrology immediately, we will burn out. Maybe we'll lose interest in it. Maybe we don't think it's fun anymore. No, it's too serious, huh? And that's not a good place to be. Huh? So just be gentle on yourself. You get exactly what you need at the moment you need it. And that's a very wise way of looking at life. And if you're able to actually accept that and listen a little bit to the dweller on the threshold that says, hey, 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 quiet now, don't worry, you have to walk before you can run. Then you don't have to go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're always integrating, processing. Cancer is a sign of digestion. You're digesting. What is the digestive system anyway? It is that the valuable nuggets of information that you need, the valuable experiences that you need, they go into your bloodstream and they become a part of your wisdom. They become wisdom. Wisdom is intelligence with experience. And I'd also dare to say love. With experience comes love. You just know, don't worry, don't stress, relax. You get exactly what you need when you need it. And that's the wisdom. So with these words, I hope you had a joyful ride through the coaching aspect of Saturn, and that you found something that you can build your astrological knowledge on, and that will also perhaps give you a little bit more information of what it means for you to have your particular Saturn placement. Yes. All right. So over and out, and talk to you guys for the questions and answers. And yeah, ciao.